Today we're going to go over how to install TAC Server on a virtual machine running Rocky Linux 9. To start, you need to open Oracle VirtualBox and select New. In here, we're going to give our server a name. This can be whatever you desire. Mine's going to be called TAC Server-1. And then we have to install our ISO. When you go and install the ISO, you can select Other if it's not already reloaded. Go to Downloads and select the ISO you desire. This will populate the fields that are necessary for the settings, and then you can select hardware. In here, you need a minimum of 5 gigs of memory and 4 cores. Depending on your machine, you can add more as desired. And in hardware, we're going to verify that we have 20 gigs of storage available, and then select Finish. This will automatically start to boot our server. While your virtual machine starts the builds, one key factor to remember is that when you select your virtual machine, your cursor gets captured within it. In order to get your cursor back to your local machine, you need to press your right control button on your keyboard. This will bring back your cursor to your local machine, and then you can move around and select anything inside it. Once your virtual machine starts up and you're at the welcome screen, you can then come up and close it so we can modify our network preferences. You're going to power off the machine, select OK, and then we're going to come into the settings for it. In here, you can navigate to the network category, select adapter 2, enable it, and then set it to a bridged adapter. You're going to come down to promiscuous mode, select allow all, and then select OK and start up your virtual machine again. Once you're at the welcome screen, we're going to select into our VM, select our dedicated language, and then select Continue. Inside the installation summary, we're going to go into our network and host name. We're going to disable this network on ENP0S3, which is our NAT network, and ensure that our network that we created, the bridged adapter, is enabled. Select Done, and then our installation sources should start to download. Inside our installation destination, we need to verify that we have at least 20 gigs of storage available that we dedicated, and then select Done. Once back into the installation summary, we're going to come into our root password. And then enter in a root password. I'm going to be using ATAC for all my passwords. When you go to select Done, you're going to have to select it twice to confirm that you're okay using an insecure password. For our full name, for our username, we're going to use TACadmin. And we're going to select make this user an administrator. For the password, it's also going to be ATAC. And then we're going to select Done twice again. Once our installation source is done downloading, we're going to come into software selection and make sure that we have a server with GUI selected. From here, we're going to ensure that we have no more errors or issues with our installation summary, and then select Begin Installation. Once your VM has finished downloading and installing the software, we can hit Reboot System. Once your system reboots, we can select on the user that we created, mine is TAC admin, and enter in the password ATAC. Once it loads, you can select No Thanks and open a terminal. In here, we have to find our IP address for us to remote into our server. To do this, we're going to type if config We then need to go into our local machine and open a terminal. From here, we need to remote into our server by typing in SSH our user, TAC admin, at our IP address. They'll ask if you want to continue. You're going to type yes and enter in the password when prompted. We can then minimize our server in the background and only focus on our terminal. We will then have to start running the pre-requirements. The first one we're going to run is this command here that we can copy over into our terminal and fix the issues with the characters here. And you should see the following output. The next thing we'll have to do is install our choice of text editor. Mine is going to be Vim. So sudo dnf install our text editor -y. Once that's done, we're going to have to install our packages for Enterprise Linux. First, we're going to have to enable Power Tools. If you're running versions of Rocky Linux earlier than 9, you're going to run this command up here. For versions of Rocky Linux 9, you're going to run this one that enables CRB instead of Power Tools. Once done, we then have to install EPEL for Rocky Linux through this command here. We then will have to go and install PostgreSQL PostGIS 15. We'll copy over this first line of code and ensure that it's formatted correctly. We then will have to run this portion. And again, ensure that it's formatted correctly. Once that's done, we then have to come in and disable Postgres. You will see this output appropriate onto the screen a couple times. This is perfectly fine. This is what we are expecting. Once done, we're going to then scroll down and we're going to run our update for our server. Once the update's complete, we're then going to copy over this line of code, and we're going to run this to install the specific version of Java that is needed. Once the installation is complete, we can move on to copying over our attack server installation file. To do this, you need to open another terminal for your local desktop and go to wherever you have this attack server installation file stored. By typing ls, you can verify that the file is in this directory. To copy this file over to your virtual machine, you're going to run the command scp, the file, followed by your username at your IP address. To place this in the current directory, you're going to do a colon, a tilde, a /, and then enter. It will prompt you for the user's password, and then it'll start copying over the file to your server. Once your server installation file has fully transferred, we can then continue. Inside of our server, we can type ls to verify that the server installation file was copied over correctly. We can then install it by running sudo dnf install followed by our file. We can go on to check this Linux status by running get enforce. And if it is enforcing, then you should follow the rest of this slide here. If it is disabled as mine is, then you do not have to worry about this. Next, we need to set up our certificates. To do this, we have to enter our tac bash user by running sudo su tac. And then we're going to go to our search directory. In here, we need to find our certs metadata file. We need to enter this with a text editor. And then we need to modify our state, city, organization, and organizational unit variables. You can also modify the country. For this instance, I'm going to leave it the same. To edit items inside of a Vim instance, you're going to press I, and then you should be able to start inserting new characters and removing them. Once done, you're going to press escape, WQ, and hit enter to escape. Once done editing that file, we're going to go down and make our root certificate. In the same directory, We can verify that we have the make root certificate script here and run it by typing make root ca.sh and then specify the name for this. Once we've made that certificate, then we're going to move on to make our intermediate certificate authority. We're going to run make cert.sh followed by ca and the name of the file. It'll then ask if it is okay if it moves around the files. You're going to type Y and then enter. Next, we need to make our server certificate. To do this, you're going to run make cert.sh followed by server and then the name, TAC server. TAC server is the default name. If you wish to change the name to any other type of naming convention, you would then run this command here to update the name for our server within the core config example file. Since we changed the name of our certificate authority, we need to update the file within the core example file. We'll run this line here to update that exact line. We can verify the changes by running this next line. And at this point, you can see that it was updated correctly within our core config.example file. The importance of the core config.example file is that this is the building blocks, and our core configuration will be built off this when we start up our server for the first time. If you also wish to change the default password used for the certificates from ATAC, you can run this next line to update that. Once we've created those certificates, we can then exit our bash user and enable our server, which allows our server to restart every time our server restarts. After that, we're now ready to start our server. With our server starting up, we can then monitor our log files to ensure that it is running without any issues. To do this, we're going to go into our log files and monitor for the files to be generated. You'll notice if you go into the log files, there's only one file being created at a time. As we monitor our log files, you can see that they are slowly being created, and we need to wait for the specific file, tacserver-messaging.log. Once the file has been generated, we can then run tail-f followed by the path and the file name. To monitor our server creation. In here, we'll be able to monitor if there's any errors or warnings that pop up to ensure that everything starts successfully. Specifically, at the end, we are looking for that the server started, and it tells us that the server has started without any issues. Now that we see the following messages at the end of this log file, we can then get out of it by doing Control-C. we can move on to creating our user certificate. To do this, we have to enter our bash user once again. We need to navigate to our certs file by running cd and followed by the path. In here, we need to run the make cert file, followed by client and our client name. Once that certificate has been generated, we need to modify the certificate permissions to admin perms. Once the permissions have been updated, we can then get our certificate and access our server. We first need to exit this bash user and go to our home directory by running cd followed by the tilde. From here, we're going to copy our certificate over to our current directory. And then we're going to copy over our TrustStor certificate as well to be able to access our server from TAC devices. Once we have our certificates, we then need to modify the permissions to ensure that the file is updated for the current user. Given that I'm in the root directory, I do not need to modify this as shown. Now that we have our certificates, we need to update the firewall so we can connect. To modify the firewall, we need to run the following command. We need to add the ports 8089, 8443, 8446. These are important as 8089 is used for the connection between the TAC server and TAC clients. 8443 is used for the admin dashboard, and 8446 is used for the web TAC. Once we run that, we need to reload our firewall to ensure that this configuration is our current one. After that, we can verify that the changes were saved by running sudo firewall.cmd and listing all of them. You can now see that the following ports were added. Now we need to copy over certificates to our local machine. In a terminal directed to the local machine path that you wish to save your certificates, you're going to run the following command. You're going to run scp followed by your user at your IP address with a colon, the tilde, the /, and the file that you wish to grab, followed by a period to indicate that you want it to this current directory. You'll be prompted for the password, which when entered, should initialize the download. We also need to get our TrustStor certificate. Again, with the password, the download will begin, and now you have your certificates. We then can import our certificates through the import wizard on Windows. Navigate to where you downloaded the certificates, and double-click it to open. You should see the certificate import wizard open. You're going to want to import it to your current user. The file path specified is the correct one. And then the password by default is atac unless changed. The first option is the one that we will use. And then verify that everything is correct and select Finish. When the security warning prompts you, you're going to select Yes. And then you should see that the import was successful and select OK. Once imported, we can then go to our browser and open a new tab. From here, we're going to type in https / followed by our IP address. With a colon, followed by 8443 for our specified port. When Enter is pressed, you're going to see that your connection is not private. You're going to select the advanced option down here in the bottom left. You're going to scroll down and you're going to select Proceed to this unsafe link. It'll ask you to select a certificate, which by default it'll select the one that is needed. And you select OK. You'll see this prompt, which you'll press OK. And then you'll be brought to the admin dashboard. You have successfully started and built your tax server. We're now going to connect and create users by selecting the hamburger menu on the top right and going to Administrative and Manage Users. In here, we're going to select our Add User option. And then we're going to come over and give our username. For my instance, I'm going to use player1. My password that we're going to use is going to be testing #taxserver1. In this instance, you can also add new groups and then manage how the user interacts with them. Once created successfully, you'll be able to see the user on the left-hand side. You can view and edit its groups by clicking it and selecting View Edit Groups. You can open a new tab and type https / your IP address, and instead of 8443, we're going to use 8446 to access WebTAC. From here, you can enter in the user you just created. And then you'll be prompted with another message, which you'll press OK. You should now see WebTAC. There's two ways to connect to WinTAC. You can create a client certificate and pass that and the Trustor certificate to WinTAC, or you can generate certificates through auto-enrollment with TaxServer. The first one we're going to go through is client certificate generation. Within our terminal, we're going to go back into our server. We're going to go back down to our search directory. From here, we're going to enter into our bash user. And we're going to run the make certs command again. We're going to make sure that we're in the correct directory by typing ls and verifying that the make cert option is here. From here, we're going to run make cert.sh client and then our user. After pressing enter, you'll see that the certificate was generated successfully. To add our user to a group, you can run either of the following. For both groups, you're going to run the following, followed by the group name. -G indicates that we're going to be adding the user to the both group. -IG indicates that we're going to add the user to an in group. And -OG indicates that we're going to add the user to an out group. By running this following script, we will add the user to both group. Once the user has been added to the group, you should see the following. It will even specify that the user has read-write permissions. Once we're done with this, we need to then obtain our client certificate. Again, we're going to exit our bash user, and we're going to go back to our home directory. Once here, we're going to copy over our certificate that we just created. If you're not using the root user, you're going to have to change the permissions for this file you just copied over by running the following. Once the permissions have been updated, we then need to go to our local terminal and run the same commands that we had before. SCP, followed by our username, at our IP address, colon, the tilde, /, and then the file name. And then specify that we're going to move this file to the current directory we're in by using a period at the end. Once you press enter, it will be prompted for your password. Once you have your user certificate, you can then open WinTAC. You can navigate to your server connection through one of two ways. You can select the cloud icon on the bottom right, which will open this section, and you can select Manage Server Connections. You're also able to navigate there by selecting the top left hamburger menu, selecting Settings, selecting Network Preferences, and then you can select Manage Server Connections. Once here, you can select Add Item, and give a description for your name. You're then going to enter the host address, which is your IP address. You're going to leave the port as 8089. From here, you're going to select Install Certificate Authority, and then you're going to select this icon over here to navigate to your saved state. The trust store is going to be this file that we saved. You're going to select Open, and then the password by default is atac. We will also need to install our client certificate by navigating to it in a similar manner. Once selected, you can press Open, and again, the default password is atac. After pressing OK, you can then select OK inside the Preference Manager. You should now see a green icon next to your server, and you should see the prompt saying that you were connected. You are now connected to your attack server as the user. Next, we're going to go over how to connect to your server with auto-enrollment. You're going to start by going to your server dashboard, and selecting the hamburger menu on the right-hand corner. You're then going to navigate to Configuration, and go down to Security and Authentication. In here, we're going to select Edit Security, and we're going to enable certificate enrollment. We're going to toggle on Tax Server CA, and then fill in the fields that are necessary. The signing key store file can be found by going to the terminal in your server and going down into the directory of the certificate files by running the following: cd opt tac certs files. In here, you can type ls to list all the files in the current directory. The specific file that we're looking for is the following. Once we've identified this, we need to then come to our signing certificate file and enter in the following: certs/files, followed by the name. Once done, you need to enter in the password, which by default is atac. You can then change the validity days to whatever is appropriate for you. The default is going to be set to 30. Once done, you can select Submit. If done correctly, you'll be taken back to this screen with the updated fields. We will then need to restart our attack server. If you navigate to your server through the terminal, we can run the following: We then can go into our log files to monitor the restarting of the server to make sure that everything is starting up correctly and there are no errors. To do this, we're going to run the following. We can then verify our server started correctly without issue by seeing these two following commands. We can then exit by typing Control-C to get out of this. Once we're out of this, we need to enter into our bash user so we can update our configuration files. We can do this by running the following: sudo tac. We then need to navigate to where our core configuration file is located by typing cd and following this path. We can verify we're in the correct location by typing ls and finding the correct file. Once we found it, we're going to enter it using our text editor that we have chosen. Once inside here, we're going to have to navigate down to our certificate section. In here, we're going to have to add our CA key and our CA certificate pathing. This should look similar to the following here. Once done, you're able to save these changes by pressing escape, WQ exclamation point. After modifying our core configuration file, we're going to have to validate to make sure our changes are correct by running the following. With these changes made, we can now connect to our server with auto-enrollment. Navigate to your server dashboard. We're going to open our hamburger menu, and we're going to go to the Administrative tab and Manage Users. In here, we're going to add a new user that we're going to use to connect. The username for this user is going to be player2. Password is going to be the same as the following: testing #taxserver1. We're going to add it to a couple different groups, and then create a new user. Once done successfully, we can then navigate to WinTAC. We're going to delete our old server and add a new one. The description for this one is going to be auto-enroll. Once again, enter in your IP address for the host address. And this time, we're going to select Enroll for Client Certificate. If you are using a fully qualified domain name, you would not need to install the certificate authority. But given that we are not, we need to install ours. Once again, you're going to navigate to the location where you saved it, and then select it and press Open. The password again is ATAC by default. Once that's done, we're going to then use authentication. The username is going to be the user that we created, player2, and the password is going to be testing #taxserver1. Once you press OK, you would see an enrolling for certificate at the bottom, and then you should see that it connected successfully. We've now shown you how to connect the tax server with WinTAC 2 different ways. Next, we're going to go over how to set up Federation Hub. To begin setting up Federation Hub, you first need to go to tac.gov and download the latest version. You're going to want to scroll down and select this version here. Once the download is complete, we're going to open the terminal to our server. The first line we're going to run is sudo yum update to update our current server. Once the update is complete, we need to verify the version of Java that is running. You can verify this by running java-version. You should then be able to see that you're running version 17, and if not, you need to run the following. If you're already running this version, you'll see that it says it is already installed. Next, we need to copy over our Federation Hub installation file to our server. To do this, open a terminal within your local machine and navigate to where that file is stored. You can verify the location navigating to the directory and typing ls. You should then be able to find that your Federation installation file is in that current directory. You're then going to run scp, the file name, followed by your username at your IP address with a colon, a tilde, and a /, specifying that you're going to put it in the home directory of your user. When you press enter, you'll be prompted for the password, which when entered, will take a couple minutes to be able to copy over this file. Once the file transfer is complete, we can then go back to our server and type ls to verify that it was copied over. We can now install it by running the following: sudo dnf install followed by the file name. We then need to check for this Linux policy by running the following: get enforce. If it is enforcing, you would run the following: given that mine is not enforcing, we're going to move on. Now we need to modify our configuration files. To do this, we need to enter into our bash user by running sudo sutac. Once in here, we're going to open the following file with our text editor. Once open, we need to scroll down to find the user and the password. We need to add a unique password for this user. To do this, you're going to press I to begin inserting and type atac. Once done, you're going to press escape, followed by the colon, WQ, and exclamation point to write and quit. Once we've modified our configuration file, we now need to install Mongo. We need to start by exiting our bash user by typing exit and returning to our server user. We then need to run the following install script. Once the installation is complete, we need to reload our daemon by running the following: sudo system daemon-reload. We then need to enable our database by running sudo system ctl enable mongod. After enabling it, we can restart the database to make sure everything's up to date. We now can configure our database by running the following: Once the setup is complete, we can then move on to editing our firewall for the ports that we're going to need to be able to connect to our Federation hub. To do this, we need to add in the ports 9100 and 9102. After which, we need to now reload our firewall. To verify these changes, we can then run the list all command to ensure that everything has been updated correctly. We can now verify that the 2 ports were added successfully. With that, we can now modify our metadata for our server. To do this, we need to first enter into our tac bash user by running sudo su tac and navigating to the certs file where the metadata is stored. We can verify we're in the correct location by typing ls to verify that the certs metadata script file is here. We now need to open it with the text editor. Once inside, we need to modify the following fields: the state, the city, the organization, and the organizational unit. Optionally, you can modify the country as well, or even the password for the certificate. Once you're done modifying this file, you can press escape, followed by a colon, WQ, exclamation point, to write and quit. From here, we can now create our certificates for the Federation Hub. Once we modify this file, we can now make our root certificate by running the following. Once we've created our root certificate, we now need to create our server certificate by running the following. We now need to modify our configuration files for these new certificates. The default names for these certificates are stored as truststore-root and tac server, which I used above. If you change these from the defaults, you're going to have to run these following commands to update the core configuration to the names that you used. You would simply place in the name that you used into the following area. And same thing for down here in the server, you would replace whatever you use for the server name in these 2 fields. Once that is done, we can then go on to creating our user. By default, the authorized users are written to this file in this location. But if you want to use an alternative location, you can run the following to change that. Now to create our admin certificate, we need to go back into our bash user. In here, we can verify we're in the correct directory by typing ls, ensuring that we see the make certs scripts here. Once we're in here, we're going to run the following. With this client created, we now need to modify its permissions so that way it is an admin. We can do that by running this following line. If done properly, you should see the following. Once done, we can exit the bash user. We now need to reload our daemon instance and restart our Federation hub. We can also enable it so that way it restarts when our server restarts, similar to how our attack server is. Next, we need to copy our admin certificate over to our local machine so that way we can access our Federation Hub dashboard. To do this, we need to go into our home directory by doing cd with the tilde. From here, we're going to run the following commands to copy our file over. With the file copied over, we now need to update the ownership of the file by running the following, if you're not using the root user. Instead of root, you would specify the user that you are currently in. Once that is done, we can now copy the certificate to our local machine by going to a terminal and the location that we want to store the certificate. Once there, similar to how before, we can copy over the file by running scp, followed by the username at the IP address, followed by a colon, a tilde, and a /. You can then specify the file that we are trying to access. Don't forget to include the period at the end to indicate that you're trying to copy the file to the current directory. Once you press enter, you'll be prompted for the password. When entered, you should see that the file was copied over. With it copied over, we can now import it with our import wizard by navigating to it and double-clicking it to open it. You're going to select current user. You're going to leave the file path to the current file. And then the password is going to be atac. And you're going to automatically select the certificate stored based on the type of certificate. After pressing next, you're going to see the summary of the information and you're going to press finish. When the security warning comes up, you're going to press yes, and you should see the import was successful. You're going to press OK, and we can now access our Federation Hub. We can now connect to our Federation Hub by opening a browser and navigating to the following link, https:// followed by our IP address, :9100, and enter. You'll see your connection is not private, and you can select advanced. You'll select continue to the unsafe link, and then you're going to select your certificate and press OK. When the pop-up comes up, you're going to press OK. And you should now see your Federation Hub. You'll be prompted for a new Federation diagram, and you can type in whatever diagram name you want, and a description. Once done, you can press OK, and you'll be taken to the overlay. From here, we're going to connect our server to our Federation Hub. To do this, we need both the certificates for our Federation Hub and our attack server. To get them, we need to go back into our terminal and navigate to our server. First, we're going to get the certificate for our Federation Hub. To do this, you need to copy over the certificate from the following path. And again, after copying over the certificate, if you're not using the root user, you need to modify the permissions for this file that was just copied over by running the following. Once done, we can navigate to a terminal in our local machine and go to the location where we want to store the certificate. Once here, we're going to copy the certificate by running SEP, your username, at your IP address, followed by a colon, tilde, and a forward slash, and the file you want to copy over. You'll be prompted for the password, which when entered, you should see that the file is copied over. Once copied over, we're going to want to navigate to it in our File Explorer and select it so that way we can update the name, so that way we don't overwrite it when we copy over other certificates. Once we updated the name, we can go back and get our tax server certificate by navigating to our server and copying it over to our home directory. We can copy it over to our home directory by running the following: sudo cp-v, followed by the path to the file, and the file name, and a period at the end to indicate that we want it to the current directory we're in. Once copied over, don't forget to update the permissions if you're not doing this as the root user. Once we copied over the file and updated the permissions, we can go back to a terminal in our local machine to where we're going to copy over the certificate. We're going to copy it over by running the following: SCP root at our IP address, followed by a colon, tilde, and a forward slash, and the file name. We're then again going to navigate to our File Explorer to where this file is located and update the name of it so that way we don't mix the files up. Now that we have both our certificates for our Federation Hub and our tax server, we can now import the certificates. We're going to navigate to our dashboard for Federation Hub. We're going to start by selecting this group icon over here and dragging and dropping it to the center of the screen. This will prompt you to add a group, which then you're going to navigate down to Choose File and import your CA for your tax server. After selecting your certificate for tax server, you're going to select Open, and then you're going to select Save. Once it says successfully uploaded the CA file, you're going to navigate to the CA group issuer, and you're going to select your CA from your tax server. Once selected, the 3 fields will be populated. You're then going to give your graph a name, and you can provide a description. We're then going to want to select the interconnected option down here that allows tax servers to communicate between each other. Once done, you can press OK. And then you need to press this icon that has a cloud with an arrow going up to update our policy and save it for the server. Once you see the message here that says it was successfully sent and updated, we can then minimize our Federation Hub and navigate to our tax server. In here, we now need to connect our tax server to Federation Hub. To do this, you're going to open the hamburger menu. You're going to navigate to Configuration. You're going to navigate down to Federate Certificate Authorities. In here, you're going to select Upload Federate Certificate Authority, and you're going to select Choose File. From here, you're going to select the certificate authority for your Federation Hub, and you're going to select Open. After which you can press Save. You should be taken back to the Federate Certificate Authorities tab. We now can navigate to our hamburger menu and go to Configurations and Federation. In here, we're going to have to start by enabling our Federation capabilities by selecting Edit Configuration and selecting Federation Enabled at the top. Once that is selected, we can then scroll down and select Save. You will now see these three sections, which we're going to select Create Outgoing Connections, so that way we can connect our TAC server to Federation Hub. You can give it a display name. And then for the address, you're going to provide the IP address for Federation Hub, followed by port 9102. And you can scroll down and select Save. After clicking Save, you'll be taken back to here, which you can now scroll up and you can see that the connection status is connected. We can verify this by navigating to our Federation Hub and seeing that now the icon is green, indicating there is a connection between our Federation Hub and our TAC server. For instance, if the connection disconnected and we disable our connection, and we navigate back to Federation Hub, you'll see that the color has changed back to white, indicating that there is no current connection. If you wanted to federate multiple servers together, you would simply create another group and add in the appropriate certificates as we did before. Select Interconnected and select OK. Once you have them both inside the diagram, you can then connect them by hovering over the server, selecting the arrow, and dragging that arrow over to the server you want the data to flow to. Once you let go, you'll see this Add Federate policy, which you then can specify which information flows to the server. After which you can press OK, and you can now see that the data is going to flow between server 2 to TAC server. Once the data is flowing between the two servers, you're going to see the arrow change from a solid line to a dotted green line, indicating the data is flowing from one place to another. We have now successfully connected our TAC server to our Federation Hub and shown how to manipulate the data flowing between two servers. Thank you for joining us on this implementation of TAC server and Federation Hub.